Hello, everyone. My name is Angela Xiao. I'm very happy to be the moderator today for this exciting webinar, 2024 Emerging Trends in Science. And let me introduce you today's speaker panel. We have Dr. Jonathan Allen from Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory. We also have Dr. Yiying Wu from The Ohio State University and Dr. Kevin Hughes from CAS, Dr. Arnold Lumsdaine from Oak Ridge National Lab, and Janet Sasso from CAS as well. So welcome, everybody. Without further ado, I'm going to introduce you our first speaker, Janet Sasso. Janet's going to talk about the undruggables.
Hi, everyone. I am Janet, and I am so excited to be here with you today to present on some of the recent advancements and trends surrounding challenging diseases myself and our team have found when analyzing the CAS content collection. Let's begin with looking at why we started researching this area to begin with. Why challenging diseases? Well, don't we all know someone who has been affected by difficult to treat illness, whether it is an aging parent, a grandparent, or friend that we've seen struggle, whether it be cancer, a neurodegenerative condition like Alzheimer's, or cardiac conditions? It is why so many of us got involved in science in the first place, right? With the vast majority of the proteome considered undruggable, today I'm going to be highlighting key emerging trends in this space that all of us can continue building upon, and also what to watch closely in this year ahead. Are you ready for it? Come along with me. Let's get started here. Alzheimer's disease affects an estimated 6.7 million Americans alone. The amyloid precursor protein is linked to Alzheimer's disease, but keep in mind it is not the sole contributor. When the APP protein is abnormally sliced, it allows amyloid beta to be released, where it can clump and form these oligomers, protofibrils, fibrils, and then eventually plaques within the brain, which causes the complications. Anti-amyloid agents have recently been approved by the FDA for the treatment of Alzheimer's. All of these agents are immunotherapeutic monoclonal antibodies targeting the disease's pathophysiology, reducing that amyloid beta in the brain. The first drug, anakinumab, received accelerated approval in 2021 and was actually the first treatment approved for Alzheimer's since 2003. Aducanumab is limited, however, in availability right now to clinical trials. It targets the amyloid beta phases from oligomer to plaques, blocking that aggregation. A second drug, lecanemab, received traditional approval just last year in 2023 and is the first drug targeting amyloid beta to actually show clinical benefits. It reduces that rate of Alzheimer's disease progression, slowing cognitive and functional decline in adults with early stages of the disease. This drug is more readily available currently in the US. It's available outside of clinical trials, and it targets that protofibril phase where it binds to them and prevents clumping. Lastly, a third drug, donanemab, has not yet been approved but is currently in the application phase for traditional FDA approval. It targets the amyloid beta plaques, binding to them and reducing their numbers in the brain. We will watch closely this first half of 2024, to see what the FDA decision will be on this drug. Next, let's continue on to another neurodegenerative disease, Parkinson's. So Parkinson's affects more than 20 million people worldwide. Alpha-synuclein is a neuronal protein that is linked to Parkinson's disease, but again, not solely responsible. In Parkinson's, alpha-synuclein becomes tangled and then forms clumps. Again, the oligomers, the protofibrils, the fibrils, and then eventually the Lewy bodies, which are the larger tangled clumps of fibrils accumulated on the neurons. 2023 brought major news for Parkinson's disease research with the validation of this alpha-synuclein biomarker. Researchers have developed a technique called the alpha-synuclein seeding amplification assay, which detects the biomarker in the spinal fluid of people diagnosed with Parkinson's disease and individuals who have not yet been diagnosed, but who are high risk. This is a major step moving forward, being able to diagnose individuals based on biology rather than just clinical symptoms, and it has major implications for future drug development. Clinical trial studies will be able to recruit a more specific population, including patients who are at the earliest stages of their disease, accelerating drug development and offering those treatment options sooner. We look forward to seeing what the near future holds for this field after this major breakthrough. Next, let's transition to looking into an immunotherapeutic modality, antibody drug conjugates, or ADCs. ADCs have become a major approach in the research and development of anti-tumor drugs. If we look at the structure of an ADC, it consists of three main components: the monoclonal antibody that binds specifically to the target antigen, a cytotoxic payload, which is highly effective at killing cancer cells, and that stable linker molecule that connects them and makes sure that that cytotoxic payload is released within the tumor cell. When we examine ADC publication trends within the CAS content collection, we see ADC research and development has had this incredible growth in the past few decades. One interesting trend for ADC publications is that patent applications outnumber our journal publications each year, starting since 1999. This particular chart looks at the number of journals and patents by year, and the trend shows a 50 times increase for patents since the 1990s low, with no signs of slowing down. We see nearly a 30% increase in patents alone from 2020 to 2022, despite the global COVID-19 pandemic. Is truly impressive. So let's next look at ADC's clinical applicability. This particular chart summarizes an analysis of 30 conditions and diseases. Oncology, represented by the dark blue on the left here, is placed as the leading research field of interest for ADCs, accounting for 80% of all journal publications and patent applications. Breast cancer has the largest number of research papers for solid tumors, followed by lymphoma for liquid tumors, and autoimmune disease for non-oncology indications on the right there in the light blue. The latest FDA ADC approvals target the treatment of ovarian, head and neck, cervical, and gastric cancers. All listed cancers on the left-hand side of the figure are also well represented currently in the clinical trial landscape. There are increasing efforts by researchers in developing effective ADC treatments beyond oncology and into other disease indications. Currently, in clinical trials outside of oncology, ADCs are being researched for the treatment of autoimmune disorders and amyloidosis. It is very exciting to think of the overall potential of ADCs, and it'll be interesting to follow ADC research to see how quickly this field advances and changes. I thank you all for your attention today, and if you would like to dig deeper into any of the material I covered, please have a look at our Scientific Breakthroughs 2024 Emerging Trends to Watch article on cas.org/trends. And please do not hesitate to reach out to me personally if you have any questions. Thank you again, and I look forward to taking your questions later.
Thank you so much, Janet, for your wonderful sharing. I'm always, so happy to see the insights, the trends prediction with the number support. That's very comforting, to people like us or to many people in the audience that we are wondering, anticipating what's going to happen, especially like ADC. This is really exciting. I'm sure you have more to share during our Q&A section, so we'll look forward to our discussion.
Absolutely. Thank you, Angela.
See you later. All right, our next speaker is Dr. Jonathan Allen. Jonathan, if you would, great. Good to see you. I know you're dialing from California. Thank you so much for joining us in this early morning.
Yeah, thanks for the chance to talk about this topic here. I'm going to talk about sort of developments in emerging trends sort of in AI and machine learning for drug discovery here.
So maybe before you start, I will read quick. I'll quickly read your bio just so the audience will know. Yes. So Dr. Allen works in the bioinformatics research in the Global Security Computing Applications Division at Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory. He leads an informatics team focused on modeling and managing data for complex biomolecular systems. He has extensive experience developing new software tools for pathogen characterization from biological samples, transcript analysis in host responses, and machine learning for small molecule drug discoveries. Thank you so much, Jonathan. All yours.
All right. Thanks for the introduction. So I'm going to just spend some time kind of walking through what I see as, things to kind of keep an eye out for emerging in this field um, in the next year for drug discovery. I'm sure this is a very hot topic, and a lot of people are probably maybe following some of this and happy to follow up with any more detailed discussions. I'll try to provide sort of a high level overview here. And sort of what I want to kind of start with here is just looking at the left side of this figure. And I don't know if you can see my see the pointer here. I was just use this laser pointer here to show that on the left here is kind of showing what has been a traditional type of drug discovery, computational drug discovery pipeline for looking for new molecules. And this is sort of the idea of starting with an existing large virtual library of molecules to screen against, and then a particular manually selected target, protein target typically, and then subjecting that library of molecules to increasingly more rigorous and computationally expensive physics-based evaluations of how that molecule may be interacting with the surrounding environment. And then the idea generally would be that with computational chemists and medicinal chemists, you would look at which of these most promising molecules are that you would like to look at further. You would try to make them and then sort of iteratively sort of evaluate the feedback as you make and test those molecules. And to some extent, we can think about this modality working primarily. It's traditionally been with small molecules. It's really starting to emerge as a practice in peptides as well. So screening large peptide libraries against a target, particularly for antibiotics, has had a lot of success recently and is moving into sort of different types of antibody screening as well. But I think the emerging trend, which is interesting to watch out for now as we're kind of moving forward in this next year, is increased ability to automate the synthesis of new biological entities and small molecule entities. So either small molecules or peptides or antibodies that can be manufactured and tested using lab automation in a way that's much more efficient than has been done in the past. And so that really is kind of changing the paradigm for how we would search for new chemical entities or biologics as well. And so what I'm showing here on the right side is sort of moving to a different paradigm shift where we're no longer screening for a fixed large collection of molecular entities that we're trying to screen against, but rather we have the opportunity to search through what ultimately can be, close to an infinitely large search space of possibly makeable chemical compounds or biologics. And just in practice, this currently means, 100+ billion small molecules that can typically be made fairly quickly and easily, but that number is rapidly growing and changing. And so we have to have these new ways of searching that chemical space. And the key emerging trend there is to use generative AI methods, which if there's time, I'll try to talk through a little bit of that concept at the end. But then beyond that intelligent search of this new space we can also see that there's a lot of new machine learning techniques that are being developed to develop faster scoring models that can try to test these and evaluate these biological entities or small molecule entities for important properties so that we can do multi-parameter design and try to get a better set of compounds that we ultimately can subject to more expensive and extensive testing. And then the last thing that I just want to highlight is just with things, recent advances with things, software like AlphaFold 2, where there's better protein structure modeling, we have a much better opportunity to sort of model many more protein structures and look at not just on-target binding and on-target effects, but also start to model how these new molecular entities will interact with other proteins in the body to get a more holistic anticipation of how accurate, how safe these molecules will be ultimately when being put into humans. So the kind of the key point that I want to highlight here is the key trend here for this to actually enable this, if you think about this, is that um, all of these machine learning and AI driven methods have to be guided by data. And what's been the powerful, compelling, paradigm in the past with physics-based simulations are that you're really just using physics to understand how to evaluate sort of different interactions, and you're not relying on experimental data that's been traditionally very difficult to collect. But what's, I think, emerging now is this opportunity to think about using these AI and machine learning models to intelligently collect new data sets that can inform a machine learning model for scoring properties, and then AI models for generating new chemical proposals or biologic proposals to evaluate something new. And what I'm just kind of highlighting in the schematic here is this really kind of growing trend in this area of using an active learning workflow. Sometimes this can be referred to as a design, build, test, and learn cycle, and some other related acronyms. But the idea here really is that we can start with some sort of pre-trained models that know very little about the biological target or the disease target that we're focused on. And then we want to sort of intelligently gather experimental data to help inform our design process as we move forward. And on the right here, I'm just showing sort of a recent example of this that was published in Science late last year, just kind of demonstrating this concept where a generative AI model was used to propose new molecules that were then automatically synthesized through a computer-aided synthesis planning method, where the molecules were synthesized and then tested against 3 different properties. In this particular case, this is actually not a drug discovery example, but more of a proof of concept here where they're optimizing molecular dyes and looking for new chemicals that would have these dye properties. But what they were able to show here is through a mostly automated system, they could iteratively make new molecules, test them, update their machine learning models, and move the properties, those new molecular structures into the area where they could have the properties that they were looking for to design against 3 different properties. So it's also multi-parameter optimization, something that would be very hard to do manually with a single person kind of controlling this decision-making process. And so the last thing, just to kind of think about where this is going now, before getting too overly excited, I think we have to look back and reflect in the last year, how far have we come with this idea of generating new molecules that are, really come from this new kind of generative AI method for getting into actual clinical trials. And we're still in the very early days of this, in that there's only so far been a handful of examples that are getting into early clinical trials right now. And some of these molecules have not made it all the way through. They started out looking very promising. And I think what the clear strength right now is still in the preclinical drug discovery phase. But there's a lot of opportunities to kind of improve this is by adding more accuracy to the more complex human systems biology models. And there's a lot of interesting opportunities there to sort of better evaluate how these molecules are doing in the systems at the systems level, and to better use the omics data that's being collected from patient populations to kind of stratify patients into different subcategories to understand which patient populations respond differently to the different new compounds that are being developed. But another practical area where I think we're seeing a lot of promise in this is in very targeted antibody redesign, where there's the potential to take an existing antibody and restore the potency, where a particular sort of infectious disease may have evolved to get around a particular antibody, where you can potentially redesign it very quickly with these generative methods. And then lastly, just here we have this opportunity to sort of extend these further into the protein modeling or generative protein area, where protein folding is becoming much more accurate computationally. And so we can imagine or think about designing more complex biologic entities as therapeutics in the future. And there, I don't know how much more time that I have, but I had a few these were just brief background slides for those just to kind of give a little quick insight. And I won't dwell on these too much further to share, make sure I don't take up too much time, but just to kind of give an insight about why these generative models are potentially powerful. Is that, with traditional combinatorial search of building these new chemical entities, or similarly with biologic entities, it's that because the combinatorial search space is so large, it's traditionally just been very hard to decide which building blocks to put together to test and evaluate over in a sort of tractable manner. And what has been sort of this innovation is to kind of really leverage the ongoing work in generative AI in other fields, and understand or recognize that a very similar concepts can be applied in small molecule discovery and biologic drug discovery. And the idea here is just what I'm showing is like the conceptually what this powerful idea that you can build a model that learns to look like what certain kinds of horses look like, and then use that model then to generate new images of horses that have the properties that you care about. And what this is kind of illustrates is this idea that the model can learn, in theory or in concept, very complicated concepts, and recapitulate those concepts into very realistic entities that could, look like other horses that have actually novel traits to them. And we can apply these similar concepts with chemistry and proteins to generate new molecules and proteins that have similar traits based on training sets of examples of chemical libraries that we think are very promising. And these new tools just give us a much more efficient way of searching that space that allows us to potentially converge on new entities that are very promising.
So yeah, my name is Kevin Hughes. I'm a information scientist and science writer here at CAS. And what I'm going to talk about in this section is emerging trends in the field of materials that are used in biomedical applications. And this is an interesting field for us because it represents this intersection between two different disciplines, biomedicine and material science. And I think what we tend to see in these intersectional fields is some really innovative work and some new ideas being generated. I think because researchers are either working outside of their field, or researchers from different fields are collaborating with one another to come up with these new ideas. So in addition to emerging trends in biomedical materials, I'm also going to talk a bit about how we can use quantitative data analysis to identify emerging trends in a field like biomedical materials. So here's what I think is an interesting example of this kind of combination of material science and biomedicine in a really exciting application. So what we're looking at here is a device that was developed by a group at Northwestern University. And this is a electronic stimulator device that's actually implanted into the body, and it's used for neuromuscular regeneration. There are a couple of interesting aspects of this that I'll point out. One is that, so it's an electronic device, but it's also bendable and stretchable, shown here on the lower right. And that allows it to kind of move and conform to dynamic human tissue. The other aspect of this that I think is really innovative is that it's mostly made of biodegradable materials. So that means that when this device is no longer needed, right, it's just used on a temporary basis, it can actually be broken down and safely absorbed by the body. So it doesn't require a second surgical procedure to remove it after it's no longer needed. So seeing something like this gets us to thinking, how can we kind of identify or map out other emerging trends in the field of biomedical materials? And the goal of doing that kind of analysis or mapping is really to provide researchers in this area with a data-based support for making decisions and planning their own research. Okay, so how can we identify some emerging trends in biomedical materials using sort of a quantitative approach? So we would start with the CAS content collection. So this is a set of about 60 million journal and patent documents that have been curated and indexed by subject matter experts. We can use natural language processing to actually identify and extract concepts from this set of 60 million documents. And when I say concepts, I'm talking about short snips of text between 1 and 6 words. So we can identify these concepts from journal and patent documents that are relevant to the field of biomedical materials. And then we can score them looking at things like how often do these concepts appear in publications? Is the frequency of these concepts appearance, is it increasing over time? And then also how often are documents that contain these concepts, how often are they being cited by other documents? So that kind of gives us a ranking or a scoring of potentially emerging concepts. Then there always will need to be some review of these concepts by subject matter experts who will confirm that these are truly scientific concepts, and then can also group and classify them. So once we have these emerging concepts grouped into topic areas, then we can dig into the document data even more to understand, what are the trends within these topic areas that are driving their growth. Okay, so if we use this approach in the field of biomedical materials, what we get is 8 key areas that are identified as emerging topics in this field. We can kind of group them into 3 different classifications. One is based on material functions. So this includes programmable biomaterials and self-healing biomaterials. And by programmable materials, I mean a material that's designed to respond to some kind of stimulus in the body. So for example, a gel that's designed to release a drug when it reaches a tumor or infection site. Self-healing biomaterials are materials that are held together by reversible or dynamic chemical bonds that can be broken and reformed so that a material can actually heal itself either on a microscopic or macroscopic level. A second group of emerging topics in biomedical materials are based on their composition. So this group includes protein and lipid-based materials. So lipid-based materials are probably not surprising to see on this list because of their extensive use in COVID vaccines over the last couple of years. A fourth group of emerging topics includes applications of biomedical materials. So here we have bioinks, so materials that are used for 3D printing of biological or biomedical materials, bioelectronic materials, which we talked about on the previous slide, materials that have some antibiotic or antibacterial ability, and then sustainable alternatives for biomedical materials. So here I'm talking about things like biodegradable face mask filters or pharmaceutical packaging that's made from renewable plastic material. Okay, so I mentioned that once we have these topic areas defined, now we can kind of go one level deeper and examine, what are kind of the trends that are driving development in these fields. So as an example, let's look at programmable biomaterials or programmable materials used for biomedical applications. This is an example. This is a device that was developed by a group at Johns Hopkins University. And what it is a box that actually folds itself under certain conditions. So the hinges of this box, the material that's shown in green here, this is a temperature sensitive or a temperature responsive polymer that actually will partially melt at a certain temperature. Then surface tension effects cause the box to fold up and make this three-dimensional shape. Right, so you can kind of imagine there's a variety of different things you can do with this to make a biomedical device. So this is an example of the use of a temperature responsive material. Within programmable biomaterials, there are many other types of stimuli beyond temperature that can be used. So one question we can ask is, within this field of research, what are the most prominent types of stimuli that are being used? And so this chart shows a breakdown of different stimuli used in programmable biomaterials. The outer ring is the distribution of stimuli we see in journal publications, and the center pie is showing the same breakdown for patent publications. And looking at the data this way, we can pull out a couple of trends. One is that looking at the breakdown of the types of stimuli, pH and magnetic-based stimuli are heavily researched in journal publications. In patent publications, there's more representation from temperature and light-based stimuli. So that will kind of give us some insight as to what are the stimuli that are most frequently being studied in an academic setting where they'll mainly show up in journal publications versus the types of stimuli that are the subject of commercialization activity, which then will typically be more heavily represented in patent publications. Okay, so what I've shown you here is really just a small window into a much larger project that we did looking at emerging trends in biomedical materials. So if you're interested in digging more into this topic, you can visit cas.org/biomaterials. Also, don't hesitate to contact me personally if you have any questions about any of the material that I've presented here today. I'll also mention that we have a more detailed phase 2 version of the Emerging Biomaterials report that's due to be published in a couple of months. And if you want to make sure that you're notified when that report is published, that will appear on the 3 CAS channels at the bottom of this slide. So thank you very much for your attention, and I look forward to further discussion at the end of this session.
Thank you so much, Kevin. And by the way, can you hear me better?
Yes, loud and clear.
Okay, awesome. We'll see you later, Kevin, in the Q&A section. Our next speaker is Dr. Yiying Wu. Let me give you a quick introduction of Dr. Wu. Dr. Wu had his PhD in chemistry from University of California at Berkeley in 2003, and then he continued his postdoctoral research at the University of California at Santa Barbara. He then became the professor at the Ohio State University in 2005 and further promoted to be full professor in 2014. He and his group focused on materials chemistry and interface synthesis for energy conversion and storage. He has received numerous awards in the field of battery and energy research. Thank you so much, Yiying, for joining us. All yours.
Thank you, Angela. This is a very kind introduction, and also when put me another hat. So I'm also a associate editor for ACS journal called ACS Applied Materials and Interfaces. So I also just want to use this kind of opportunity to promote my journal. Yeah, this is definitely a very exciting period to study battery. So this can be highlighted by the 2019 Nobel Prize oops, I'm sorry, give me a second. Yeah. By Yeah, sorry about that. Just trying to work out the slide buttons. Yeah, so highlighted by the 2019 Chemistry Nobel Prize, so awarded to Professor Stan Whittingham, John Goodenough, and Dr. Yoshino. Here I just want to cite a very interesting paper that published the end of last year by Professor Stan Whittingham and Dr. Xiao, and talking about 50 years of lithium-ion batteries and what is next, right? So this is exactly the topic for this short presentation. So what would we expect next? So overall, I think is that the trend is still trying to shoot for a higher energy density. So it's trying to pack more energy in smaller volume and also smaller mass. So one thing that is important is for any kind of battery, it is a big system. So we not only need to consider the chemistry inside the individual electrochemical cell, we also need to consider the whole system. So then under the umbrella of a cell chemistry, so I list a few topics that can be important and also interesting. So one is the continue on the lithium metal anode. So in fact, this was the original anode used 50 years ago when the first rechargeable lithium battery was developed by Professor Stan Whittingham. But then it was found that when you try to use the lithium metal in the deposition, that is during the charging process, they can grow dendrites. So then how do we overcome the dendrite growth has always been a big challenge. But the big potential for lithium metal is that, well, you can save huge volume and also have much higher energy density. So this will be a continue like a hot area. So then associated with the pursuit of the lithium metal, then another is like a solid state batteries, because the one idea to overcome the dendrite is just to introduce a solid ion conductor that can block the growth of the dendrites. So that's stimulate a lot of interest in solid state batteries, or at least a quasi or hybrid solid state batteries. So then how do we improve the contact between solid and solid can be a big a challenge and a big opportunity in the future. And then along the direction of the reducing the cost and also the supply chain is that we're trying to use a localized supply chain. So then we don't need to rely on lithium that's transported for a long distance. So then there's also a lot of interest in sodium batteries and also some interest in potassium-based batteries. So then this is also going to be a big impact for the low cost and also reliable supply chain that is. And also extreme conditions. One good example is many people in Columbus and also in Midwest recently, last week, there's an extreme cold for quite a while. So that is a real thing. And then how do you ensure that the batteries can still be charged? Like your Tesla will cannot be charged, then will be a big issue. So then how do you operate the battery under extreme cold? That can be a big challenge. And other things is when you're trying to reduce the cost and also increase the energy density. So it's all come down to the not only about the abundance of the elements, but also is that you're trying to store the electron in the lightest possible elements, right? That's why the lithium is attractive. This is the lightest metal. But on the cathode side, right now, we still rely on like a cobalt, manganese, and nickel. So those are relatively heavy elements. So then a big attractive feature for sulfur and oxygen is that we are using much lighter and also much more abundant elements to store the electrons. So those are still going to have a high impact in the future. So that is like from the cell chemistry is how we can consider from the anode, cathode, electrolyte to pack more energy inside the cell. And then, as I mentioned, is that, well, it is the scale is so large and it is a system. So then we also have to consider is that beyond the cell is that how we need to consider is how we manufacture and how to reduce the energy cost, how to reduce the CO2 emission, for example, and how to reduce the use of the solvent, and how to reduce the use of, like, for example, fluorinated polymer as binders. So those can be all like issues is that continue to reduce the energy consumption. And also related to, I just already touched, is that about the long distance transportation and how to build regional supply chains. So this is very important, if you rely on lithium or if you rely on cobalt, then there's always like tens of thousands of miles of transportation between the mining site to the manufacturing site. So how to solve this problem, like especially like if you use a sodium-based, potassium-based, and sulfur-based, oxygen-based. So those batteries were much easier to be manufactured locally. So that I think will be another things to consider. And then another thing definitely is can become very serious is how do we recycle batteries? Or even when you design a new battery, maybe we should consider it at the very beginning is that what can we handle the battery at the end of the life? And do we have a plan that is environmentally friendly and it can handle the huge scale of the battery when it comes down to the end of the life? So then especially attractive is from cradle to cradle is that there is like a recycling, or there's like a really good use of the end of life batteries. This is very going to be a important issue. And then always safety. So when we trying to pack more energy into smaller volume, then basically it's also going to have the potential, we have to take the safety even more carefully. When you're trying to develop high voltage batteries, those high voltage normally means the lattice framework become less stable. Like the oxide can be oxidized into oxygen and release out. And oxygen with a flammable liquid can be like a recipe for danger, right? So then all those considerations need to come in. So overall, I just want to summarize is that, well, it is definitely exciting period. As you can see from thousands of papers each year from all the different publishers. So here I just want to show some like highlights.
Thank you so much, Yiying. It's exciting to see, researchers like you continuously working on this field, make our, at least the battery, right, application, whether from the manufacturing or functionality, even the environmental concerns, more and more optimized. Thank you, and we'll get back to you later. Thank you. Our next speaker, the last but certainly not least, Dr. Arnold Lumsdaine from National Oak Ridge Lab. Let me quickly read his bio. Dr. Lumsdaine is the director of the Innovation Network for Fusion Energy and the leader of the Fusion and Engineering Group in the Fusion Energy Division at Oak Ridge National Lab. He has served as lead engineer for the Materials Plasma Exposure Experiment. It's called MPEX facility. This is a world-class linear plasma material interaction device, and it is planned for future operation at the Oak Ridge National Lab. Dr. Lumsdaine received his PhD in mechanical engineering from the University of Michigan. He has served as an associate professor at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville. All yours, Arnold.
Okay, thank you. And I guess the topic of fusion may be appropriate, having someone from Michigan going after someone from Ohio State. But anyway, and this was listed as being a talk on nuclear fusion. The word nuclear for many of the private fusion companies is been dropped in more of a focus on energy. So I kind of put the title here as fusion energy. And thank you for that kind introduction. So this is a little bit maybe different from some of the previous talks, but I was asked to focus on particularly some of the materials challenges, and I'll get to that, but I want to start with a bit of motivation and where we are in this fusion challenge. So big picture, the future of civilization depends on energy. I think that should go without saying, but health, education, economy, all are directly correlated with energy consumption and human flourishing. And our energy needs are going to be growing substantially this century. From the IPCC, you can see this projection towards the end of the century. We'll need 35,000 gigawatts of additional non-CO2 producing energy sources. That's 35,000 gigawatt plants. That's about 3 times the amount of energy that's currently being consumed in the world. And so by mid-century, the annual global energy investment would need to increase substantially. And I want to point out this does not call for incrementalism. Slight optimization of existing sources is not going to be able to get us to where we need to be by the end of the century. So what better way to address this than to produce a brand new carbon-free source? Of course, a challenge in thinking about nuclear fusion energy, it's always been intriguing. It's been talked about for decades, but has seemingly been unattainable. The subject of jokes. Fusion is the energy of the future and always will be. So what is new now that we can talk about the possibility of fusion energy actually being on the grid? Well, there's actually a confluence of new developments really just in the last several years. It's just been roughly a year since the National Ignition Facility produced a burning plasma, produced net energy in a fusion reaction. And the Joint European Torus in the UK demonstrated deuterium tritium fission in a magnetically confined fusion device. So we have scientific improvements. We have an improvement in mindset and political will. There are multiple reports, I'll talk about these in a minute, from US expert groups indicating a readiness and urgency for fusion. There's technological improvements. Some of them are in fusion, some of them are in corresponding areas that can be applicable to fusion. We all know about the advanced manufacturing, how that field has exploded. High performance computing. These have produced extensive predictive tools for optimizing performance for fusion devices. Advances in materials, in superconductors, particularly in high temperature superconductors, have produced possibilities that we couldn't have imagined before. And there's also this new ingredient of significant private capital and entrepreneurship that has come into the field. So the confluence of all these things is bringing a new age in fusion. The National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine have produced several reports. Back in 2017, a general report on grand challenges included fusion, producing energy from fusion as a grand challenge for this century. a report in 2018 specifically on burning plasma research said now's the right time for the U.S. to develop plans to benefit from investment in burning plasma research and take a step towards the development of fusion electricity. And a report just a few years ago on bringing fusion to the U.S. grid said successful operation of a pilot plant in the 2035 to 2040 timeframe requires urgent investments by DOE. So this is within decades. The idea is that we will have fusion on the grid. And as I said, this private industry, so for decades, fusion has largely been a publicly funded scientific focused process. But recently, private companies have sprung up, many, and the private capital investments have skyrocketed in the last several years. Currently, there's been over $6 billion invested in private fusion companies, and much of that has been just in the last 3 years. The Fusion Industry Association, and there's a little link here, if you go to fusionindustry.association.org, it's a nonprofit advocacy agency, has 37 member companies and 80 affiliate members. The US government has announced a decadal initiative to develop fusion energy. And you see here a clip from the White House summit on developing a bold decadal vision for commercial fusion energy. There is a Fusion Energy Caucus, a bipartisan Fusion Energy Caucus in the House of Representatives. So it's getting focus at the US government level as well. Department of Energy has traditionally primarily focused on funding plasma physics scientific research, and that is expanding into the technology and engineering areas as well as into public-private partnerships. That is an essential part of developing a new energy source and not just having a scientific mission. So the Infuse program was launched in 2019, and I'm privileged to direct that program now. And this enables private firms to tap into public sector expertise and facilities in order to address key issues. Want more information? infuse.ornl.gov. So there are 11 participating DOE labs and any number of private companies that have applied for awards in order to bring that expertise from the national lab into the private sector. Last year, DOE announced a milestone program, or actually gave awards for a milestone program that's similar to the NASA COTS program, where companies applied for funding that's released once they reach certain milestones, and this should end in the companies producing a pilot plant. The 5-year goal is to produce a preliminary design for a pilot plant, and 8 awards were given in 2023. So just a real quick explanation of what this fusion power is, and really this is towards bringing in what are the grand challenges and ultimately what are the challenges in materials, which would be of most interest to this audience. So 3 significant scientific and technological challenges. First, you need to get this deuterium and tritium ion. This is the most common concept for fusion, close enough to overcome their electromagnetic repulsion. To do that, they have to get up to about 150 million degrees Kelvin, about 10 times the temperature of the core of the sun. And when that happens, a strong nuclear force takes hold and you get fusion. You produce a helium atom as well as a high energy neutron. And so the first challenge is controlling, sustaining, and predicting this high temperature burning plasma. And this is, we could say, a plasma physics challenge. And that's where most of the investment of the US public program has been in the last number of years. So once you produce this fusion, once you control the plasma and produce that fusion, you're trying to put the sun in the box. And so the question is, what do you make the box out of? You need materials that can handle this extreme reaction. And then finally, you need to harness that power. And so you have the plasma physics challenge, you have the materials challenge, and then the harnessing is the engineering challenge. If we look at where we are using this technical readiness level model, where a technical readiness level of 1 means it's just a concept on paper, 9 means it's deployed. creating and sustaining the fusion power that is the plasma physics challenges are well on the way with different experiments that have been running in the US and around the world, plasma physics experiments. The materials challenges are less mature, and the engineering challenges are much, much less mature. And so these are the areas of needed investment. So I'm going to focus in this one slide really on the plethora of materials challenges. And this is something that could very easily be an hour-and-a-half talk on its own. But what's listed here, you see kind of 4 axes of significant challenges: the high temperature and high stress. Okay, you have the plasma that's 150 million degrees, and you have a material that is facing it that produces both high temperatures and high heat flux. You can have transient events that produce thermal shock. That high energy neutron ends up interacting with the materials and producing high atomic displacements, which transmute the material over time. You get helium, swelling, additional dislocations, and changes in various material properties. So from the transmutations, you also have high temperature helium embrittlement, irradiation creep, fatigue, and then you have the chemical environments, which can come both from the plasma, from the hydrogenic and helium species, as well as from the coolant that's necessary in order to have thermal control and to in order to access your power cycle. And you can have stress, corrosion, cracking, various things from the chemical environment. So it's an extreme environment all around. What's not mentioned here is it's also generally in a high vacuum, in a high magnetic field. So there are aspects that some materials that are not candidate materials because of those additional extreme environments. So what's going on now? Fusion facilities in the next decade. The largest scientific experiment, and if by largest we mean the most expensive scientific experiment in human history, is underway right now, is being constructed in Cadarache, France, 35-nation collaboration. And when fully operating, will produce 500 megawatts of fusion power for 400 seconds. So this will demonstrate completely all of the plasma physics challenges, some of the materials challenges, and a few of the engineering challenges for fusion power. Here at Oak Ridge National Lab, we currently are constructing the material plasma exposure experiment, MPEX, and that will support the development of candidate plasma facing materials. So this is really a materials test stand that's currently under construction, with operation expected by early 2028. Some of these reports that I mentioned previously, the fusion prototypical neutron source has been identified as a key facility, next facility that needs to be built in order to fill material science gap for exposure to fusion neutrons. One thing that I forgot to put on this slide that I will put in the chat, if anyone's interested in looking further at fusion materials, there is an ARPA-E announcement for $30 million in awards for what's calling Chadwick program for generating new fusion materials, first wall materials for fusion, that plasma facing material. I will also add that the materials challenge has been identified by the Office of Fusion Energy Science as a key challenge. The president's budget for FY 2024, which we all know has not been enacted, but included $40 million for a new center in fusion materials. And there are plans, there's, we'll say, these centers are likely to be initiated even if they're not fully funded, because of the high priority of accomplishing these things in order to achieve fusion power. So with that, I'll close.
Thank you so much, Arnie. This is really exciting. I almost wanted to ask you, how big is the MPEX equipment here you just showed in your slide? Is it like a size of the building, a house?
Yes, that's a good question, and I didn't go into any detail. And what I showed in the slide is only a little piece, actually, of the MPEX facility. It'll be about 50 feet from stem to stern, so really it's not that large. And the plasma it'll produce is only centimeters in diameter. There, I'm going between English and metric units, but so this target exchange cart that's shown here is only about 4 feet high.
Wow. Wow. Excellent. Thank you
And
so much. Yeah.
yeah,
Go ahead.
I was
So,
just going to say it'll allow the capability to have neutron damaged radiated materials. And so it's looking at the joint effect of plasma exposure and neutron damage.
great. So I think from here, I would like to bring all the speakers here. If you can bring up your camera, and we will have this Q&A section. Now, the current slides showing, which is the CS Insights. If you have more interest in wanted to know what's coming or exciting scientific trends, feel free to visit our website, cas.org/insights. Christy, if you can help us zoom in speakers camera, that would be great. All right, so maybe we can start with any questions among the speakers, anything you would like to know from each other.
I have a question for Jonathan, if I may go. As Angela mentioned, here at CAS, us as scientists curate that data disclosed in scientific publications. For your large learning models, where do the chemical or peptide libraries or that patient information that you mentioned, where does that come from? And what is the quality of that data?
I think that's actually one of the critical challenges is being able to collect and collate curated experimental data. I think, in the past where, my experience has been that, every pharma company has invested a lot in developing their own proprietary data sets. And then you have sort of the biotech companies and other sort of independent entities that are looking at using subscriptions to commercial curation services and things that kind of collect data. But it's a real potential hindrance right now in the sense that there's a lot of data that's being generated, but it's very complicated to kind of make use of it all. And I think just one of the complexities is just generally the heterogeneity of these experimental systems. And so it takes a lot of work for somebody to go through and understand how an experimental system is set up and how to sort of curate it in the context of a machine learning training set. So yeah, I don't know if that is sort of addressing that question, but I think it's sort of, you're raising an important problem that I think is like, there's a lot of funding agencies that are actually interested in thinking, how do you address this problem so we can be more efficient in learning from existing data sets?
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you, Jonathan. I think in your presentation also mentioned a little bit of how to utilize AI or machine learning to better collecting those experiment data. So we will have a wider spectrum of experiment conditions being recorded or reflected in the data set.
Yeah. And I think that's just fundamental reality of, any of these kinds of systems or particularly around these sort of generative systems where we're talking about making proposals for new entities. There's just inevitably an experimental data collection component where you have to go out and collect more data for your particular application. But to the extent that we can do that more efficiently, I think is an exciting prospect.
Excellent. Any other questions from the panelists?
I had a question for Arnie about plasma-facing materials. I think I'd heard in the past that liquid or molten metals are proposed for use in, I guess, the plasma-facing wall of fusion reactors. Can you explain how that would work and why you'd want to use liquid metals for that?
Yes, so there are several research teams that are looking at liquid metal walls, and the main advantage is a solid wall is going to sit there and take neutron flux for as long as it's in place, and will have continued transmutation of materials and receive material damage. And there is no material we know of now that could survive, say, a 20 to 40-year lifetime, what you would want for a power plant. So the idea is, instead of having a static wall, to have a liquid wall that's continually refreshed. And that solves some problems while also producing others, which we could discuss. But that's really the motivation. The magic of a liquid metal wall is that it's not static and would not need to be replaced, or you'd have the problems of maintenance. And lithium is often considered, partly because lithium is also used as a breeder material in order to make tritium for the fusion fuel.
That's cool. Thank you.
Yeah, good question.
Thank you, Ernie. Now I'm going to start the questions from the audience. Okay, the first question is about the battery and the fusion energy. So maybe Yiying and Ernie, if you can, join. Let me read the question. How does the work on lithium batteries or fusion energy fit into the U.S. plans to push for more use of electric vehicles? How is that energy provided now for electric vehicles, for example, coal? And how will it be provided in the future? Like they ask, if you can draw a picture for future, how the EVs will function.
Well, I think for the first question, maybe I can answer the first part, but about fusion, I leave to Arnie. But push for the more use of EV, I think probably there's still two main challenges. One is, I think, hold people back is the anxiety of the mileage, right? So that's related to the fast charging problem. Is that if you need a half an hour to charge your battery to 80% of capacity, that will be always some limitation. So now the question is how to charge it within 5 minutes, if that's possible. Then it will really gonna take a big concern away. And then the second thing, probably I already mentioned in my presentation, is under extreme conditions, how you can ensure that your battery can operate under cold condition, for example, and over 10 years. So I think those probably will be still some major issues that need to be resolved to push for application.
So let me answer the easy question first, which it seems to imply, a push to an electric vehicle. An electric vehicle is only as clean as the grid that electric vehicle is drawing electricity from. So if you're producing electricity from 100% coal and gas, then an electric vehicle is not clean. It's not carbon neutral. So the cleaner we make our grid, the cleaner the electric vehicles will be, and fusion is a totally carbon-free energy source. The harder question related, which I don't know if this is part of the question, gets into lithium supply, because lithium is needed for breeding in most fusion concepts. And at a certain point, if we need a lot of lithium for batteries and a lot of lithium for our 35,000 fusion power plants, there will be an issue there. And that is a challenge that I can't speak directly to. I'm not an expert in that area.
Thank you so much, both. I'm going to switch the gear a little bit. Here, there are a list of questions actually related to formulation, to drug delivery, and nanotechnology. So let me read these questions all together. I think they're related. Is anyone studying biologic nanotechnology such as exosomes? As a matter of fact, actually, CES does publish an exosome review article a while ago. What are you seeing with advancements with AI and exosomes? Excellent question. Exosomes is much more complicated than lipid nanoparticles, and maybe Jonathan can chime in a little bit later. And then the last is, how much AI does CES currently? Oh, this is a separate question. So let's focus on the exosomes and the AI and the drug formulation delivery. So Janet and Jonathan, if you want to share.
I do not know anything on the AI front, but that is one of the emerging areas, as Angela stated, that a lot of research is being put into for the past, I'd say 5 to 10 years on exosomes and their use for not only drug delivery, but treatment itself for things like cardiovascular disease.
Jonathan, have you heard anything of utilizing AI in exosomes or even other drug formulation delivery systems?
Yeah, I mean, so I'm not familiar with any exosome work. I'm more familiar with nanolipid particle formulations, and there, I mean, I really have seen limited activity around using AI for designing these systems, but that could be an area for, for future, more for better development. I'm not.
Certainly, I know in the lipid, derived drug delivery system, types of lipids are important, right? So maybe AI could help to predict what kind of lipids, like cationic lipids, how their structure may be formed, unique, shape of the lipids, and being able to capture the drugs. So that would be an exciting area to explore, actually. Lipids, usually they're a little bit more complicated than traditional small molecules. They're kind of in between of small molecule and large biological molecules, right? If we are capable to predict structures like protein, more likely AI should be capable to do on the lipid side.
Yeah, and I think there's been a lot of work in just doing basic physics-based understanding of how lipids formulations can be improved. But I think if there may be interesting ways to sort of use that, simulation-based data to sort of train on and use for building models that could help you sort of screen different formulations potentially.
Yeah. So next question may be a little bit more general. Actually, that was asked at the very beginning. What are the fundamental differences between AI and machine learning? Jonathan, I think that's a question for you.
Yeah, I can address that one. So I think machine learning would be really more focused on task-specific problem solving. So thinking about building statistical data-driven models that are focused on predicting a specific property, addressing a specific task. I think of an AI system or an AI model as being a superset of that, where you're in theory trying to replace what the person does, or perhaps more realistically, augment what the person does, where you think about a sort of an AI chemist, if you will, could be somebody that is, or something that is a system that it's actually trying to propose new molecules, decide which molecules to make and test in some sort of automated driven system, whereas the machine learning models would be sort of evaluating how successful the system is at carrying out those tasks. But they're really closely related. So AI, I kind of think of as a superset of machine learning. And you can think of those more complicated systems like active learning workflows, reinforcement learning, where you're trying to carry out complex set of tasks to be the overarching AI system.
Thank you, Jonathan. I do have a question for Arnie about nuclear fusion. So once people hear nuclear, to a general audience, we're always concerned about the waste, right? And also the resources as well. How much deuterium or tritium we have on the Earth. Any information you would like to share with this audience?
Yeah. So the quick answer is, if it's deuterium, deuterium is plentiful and abundant. 1 out of every 30,000 molecules of water in the ocean is HDO and not H2O. So deuterium is abundant. We have enough deuterium on the planet to meet all our energy needs for billions of years. Tritium has a half-life of 13 years and so doesn't exist naturally, and so must be produced. And that's why there's this use of the neutron, the fusion neutron with lithium to produce tritium. And so there has to be a closed fuel cycle. Most fusion concepts have. So in terms of waste, there should not be any waste from the fuel cycle. You produce helium, and so it's an inert compound from the fuel cycle. Now, you do produce, because these high energy neutrons interact with the materials, those necessarily are activated. And so there is a concern for low level, short-lived radioactive waste. There is no high level, long-lived radioactive waste from a fusion reaction. So that's the short answer.
Well, that's very exciting to hear. So short-lived is good, right? So almost we can consider that as a clean energy, let's say. Yeah.
Yes.
Great. So we are looking forward to this promising future. Our next question is to Kevin about the biomaterials. In the past, a lot of research focused in terms of treating human diseases. Oftentimes we're focused on small molecule drugs or biologics drugs, their ways of interacting target proteins, but materials may be an area that people have been not largely, but somewhat neglected. Maybe the importance of materials contribution to treatment of human health and disease. What do you see of the future, in these biomaterial research?
Yeah, I think there's great potential here to really revolutionize some areas of healthcare with materials advances. And we identified these 8 different emerging areas in biomedical materials, and I think there's probably I'd mention 2 things that I would expect to happen in the next few years in those areas. One is combining multiple properties into single materials so that they can be used for these kind of multifunctional treatments. So, using the aspect of self-healing, where you can actually, break down a gel into a low viscosity liquid so that it can be injected through a needle, combining that with programmability, so that once that gel is inside the body, it can target disease areas. It's things like that, is building in, multifunctionality in the materials that's challenging, but also has a lot of really promising applications. The other big area for development there, I think, is going to be more extensive in vivo and clinical testing, because there's one of the big unanswered questions around a lot of these materials is their compatibility and stability inside the body over long times.
Thank you, Kevin. I do have a few more questions for Jonathan. Looks like we have a big AI group of people in the audience. The question goes, is there data or research showing a general comparison between the efficiency of using generative AI to help with the screening process for new drugs versus the traditional high throughput screening? So
yeah, that's a good question. I've been wanting to see that kind. I mean, it would be lovely to see that kind of side-by-side comparison. I don't think that I've seen a very rigorous side-by-side comparison. I think one of the, and just to mention, I think, just on the high throughput screening side, there's the use of DNA encoded libraries has been a very popular and growing area on that side of things, where you can do combinatorial testing experimentally of billions of chemicals combined. But I think even on that side, there's when you're doing that, there's always this opportunity to build a machine learning model that's learning from that data and can help you more efficiently sort through the results that you've gotten. But to answer the question just directly, I haven't seen really a very satisfying sort of side-by-side comparison, but it's a very kind of a tricky kind of experimental setup to do that. And I think some of it is, weighed by the complexity about what is the objective of the task. Because a lot of times, I think, people are interested in trying to come up with more creative compounds that are getting outside of patent space and things that aren't necessarily easily directly comparable.
Yeah, I think I personally work with high throughput screening. My view is that these two are not competing with each other. They have different, like you said, different purposes. Using AI may help us to generate a larger scale of molecules, maybe generate a set of library compounds that the high throughput screening process will be more efficient following that AI, preparative work. And just like you said, Jonathan, the AI may help to, discover or design newer type of molecule, just help us to think out of the box. So I think these two can work with each other, the next question actually is about CAS. How much AI does CAS currently use in their products, such as Sunfinder? I cannot review too much because I'm not working on a product line, but I can certainly tell CAS values the quality of the data a lot. We do frequent data harmonization, make sure all the data they're compatible with each other, and the AI certainly will be a good tool for us to kind of help our experts like Janet and Kevin along their daily work. So that's all I can. Anything, Kevin or Janet, you would like to add on these questions?
Yes, while we, like you said, Angela, while we can use AI, we are definitely not straying away from our human curated
Yeah.
aspect, because that is what provides the most high quality of data, even if you use AI first, to have that human set of eyes on it second.
Thank you, Janet. So looks like we're very close to the end of this webinar. I would like to invite each of the speakers here to share your final message to our audience. Maybe we can start from Yiying. You want to go first?
Oh yeah, sure. I think for me is that probably in the future is I want to like maybe emphasize some like from the systematic point of view is that we see a lot of breakthroughs, and then many of the breakthroughs are from like the cell level. But in the future is that to really have the impact to the battery industry. It's very important is that is considered from the engineering, like the systematic code design, so that make sure that what it described can really have a real impact to the community. Yeah, that's my summary.
Thank you. I will go along my screen. Janet, you're next.
Yeah, I hope everyone today has enjoyed this very diverse topic webinar and is able to gain some insight into what areas of research to dig more into and to follow this year for inspiration.
Jonathan?
I guess I'll just sort of say that the kind of emerging challenges are better human translation models for are these early clinical drug discovery advances so that we can see better translation in clinical trials, and sort of continued improvement of just automated experimental systems where we're making breakthroughs and being able to make and test things more efficiently and in an automated fashion. I think those are exciting areas that we'll see kind of develop.
Thank you. Kevin, you're next.
I think in my experience, the best route to solving these really difficult material science challenges is like a combination of computational science or simulation and modeling with experiment. And so it's just it's exciting to see in these kind of diverse fields that approach is being taken, and that these modern computational tools like AI and machine learning are being applied to really difficult material science challenges. So it's very cool to see that across different disciplines. So, and thank you everyone for attending the webinar today. This was great.
Arnie, you're the last one, but certainly not the least again.
All right, but I won't ask you on who is the least. Must be someone. But anyway, I think I appreciate what Kevin said about the importance of the necessity of having the advanced computational models and the experiments. I want to add to that and maybe say I think it's good that there was such a diverse set of topics Even though a lot of these things may seem a little unrelated, and I feel like the stepchild here in some ways, in that fusion is not typically, this is not a community that is typically involved in the fusion enterprise. But I think great science advances not only when we have the computational models and the experiment, which are essential, but when we've got great people interacting with one another from diverse fields. Very often we get into our little enclaves and talk to only people who are experts in our area. And when we've got really, really outstanding people, bright people who come from different fields, they can often provide new perspectives. And so I think that's maybe a part of the value of this type of a seminar as well.
Thank you so much, Ernie. I'm really happy to hear that. Yeah, this is one of the purpose, we are trying to facilitate with a webinar with a very diversified topics. And here, reaching to the end, we still have a few more questions, actually quite a lot of questions. We haven't got a chance to answer that, but stay tuned. We'll try to answer those off the line. My take-home question is, message is that one of the audience asked, how do we, monitor these scientific trends, right? Come do visit us on cs.org/insights. You will find a lot more exciting papers, announcements there, of our recent research. Thank you so much. Have a great day. See you later.